Hey there, I am Lucas Ryder, executive producer and co-writer of episode 902, The Skinner, Conclusion. You are listening to the Blacklist Exposed on Golden Spiral Media.
Well, if Red is buying, then I am definitely drinking. Welcome, everyone, to the award-winning The Blacklist Exposed podcast. Greetings, one and all. I'm Agent Troy Heinrichs.
And I'm Agent Aram Peterson. I still wish Ressler's beard would go all the way up his beautiful face. It's driving me nuts. There's a little too much space between beard and, yeah. Anyway, thanks for joining us yet again for number 45 on the Blacklist, The Skinner Conclusion, written by Lucas Ryder and John Eisendrath, and directed by Matthew McLuda. Show notes and other intel for this episode of The Blacklist Exposed can be found at theblacklistexposed.com. I don't know who wrote the exchange between Panabaker and Cooper, but that's probably my favorite part of the episode. Love that banter.
The banter was good. I also loved the smooching in this episode. I think that was my favorite part.
You're into whatever you're into, man. That's what I say.
That was choice. I laughed so hard and I clapped. I literally clapped in front of the computer screen. I was like, every single audience member that listens to this podcast and watches the show is primarily, around that demographic, we'll call it. And I was just like, they're all just sitting there going like, why wasn't it me?
Meanwhile, apparently, Troy, he likes to do drive-bys to retirement homes. Okay, so where do you want to go from here in terms of the podcast? And should you mention that obviously you sound a little different. You're remote.
I do. I am remote today. You're
on like a PlayStation 3 headset or something. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I'm in the desert. Actually, really close to one of our listeners, Judy. I'm about maybe a couple hours from her. So
that didn't sound creepy at all.
Hoping we were able to connect, but apparently she's in a different part of the state than where I am. So, but hi, Judy. How are you?
You sure she didn't just go to the other part of the state to avoid having to see you?
That would be my
guess.
That's very possible. My guess. So, no, we should do the profiling question from last week because I'll just be honest. Aaron and I did not see this episode in advance when we asked the question last week. So this should just tell you how in tune the both of us are with the show. But we said, will the task force? Real in tune.
Like we couldn't, apparently 70% of us are in tune as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to spoil it.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, like, I honestly felt like they weren't going to go back to the well. I really thought they would maybe do something different and change up the sets there. Yeah, I did.
Why would you waste that set? That feels like just wasted money. In today's day and age, so much content, so much budget out there. I don't see a reason to do that. Maybe throw some paint on it.
Because it's a different show. You got to go a different thing. I kind of like
it's a cool set.
I kind of like the club, like going from house to house and place to place and not going back to the FBI. I thought that would have been cool just to be part of the Blacklist organization and not be part of the FBI again. But sadly, yes, we are back in the post office. We got that answer pretty quick. Setting up the rest of the season. 70% obviously in tune with us. 29 said no, they won't go back. And 1% said, I don't care, which is actually kind of funny when you think about it.
Did they do it fugitive style? I don't care. That's the only way you can say that.
It absolutely is.
It's probably my most popular GIF that I use. GIF or GIF, depending on your personality. And I don't care is definitely my top 5. I use that all the time. Somebody's like, well, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't care. I just don't. Well, the question for next week is, why does Red want to be the Skinner? Why is that so important to him? I mean, he basically came back to do the task force, got the immunity deal, did it all again to be the Skinner. Why? What's the reason? What's the end game there?
And is that the new mythology or not? We'll have to find out.
Could be. I mean, can I ask you in terms of, well, you know what? Let's get into the actual episode because that question will come back.
That's right. So pay attention so we can do what we do in this week's case profile.
All right. Well, it's a race against time as the Skinner is close to accessing either way the software that will give him full control of the most elaborate microchips in the industry. All that is standing between him and his glory is Senator Panabaker. I think it's funny that this is the storyline because everybody's wanting their stuff because there's not enough chips. So they definitely seized on that opportunity to get this storyline in there. Look, it's timely. because none of us can get what we want when we want it. That's why I want stuff. Well, it turns out that good old Cynthia rose up the ranks and is now a sitting U.S. Senator. It's been 2 years. She moved fast. Like, really fast. You can only be senator every 6 years, so that's really fast. And still loathes Harold and the team just as much as before. That is, unless they are looking to do some good. So she agrees to let Cooper, Aram, and Ressler and Park back in the FBI. Well, Park was still there. Back in the FBI, and also bring us back to the post office like we just talked about, along with a new team member, Dembe. Yes, he's still an FBI agent, to take Liz's old spot. Is that the way we want to phrase it? To take Liz's old spot? Because that's the way I said it. All right, the team with Red's help does eventually save the day, but in true Blacklist fashion, a win for the task force is also a win for Reddington. But what is that win? An old procedure in the line of the Skinner is to allow 2 former Skinners the ability to revoke the power of the current Skinner and select a different successor. Well, it just so happens that the new Skinner is none other than Raymond Reddington. Now, that brings me all that. That's what happened. It brings me to my question. And keep in mind, this is kind of like a part 2 of the podcast. So a lot of the stuff we covered in the first episode. But this I didn't really talk about. In terms of the Skinner, that's kind of new mythology. I mean, Dread Pirate Roberts, which they're referring to, that's Silk Road. That's a whole different thing. But, I get the connection. I like it. On the same token, do you like having this deep of a mythology, like this heavy of something, and never having it mentioned before that I can recall anyway, in previous seasons?
Well, I mean, would you consider the map from season 3, all the different colored dots on the map, is the Skinner organization one of those players that are out there in the criminal world? So is it not mentioned? Sure. Is it like an ancillary thing in the background that you can tie back to? Yeah, I think so.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't think this is anything we needed to know until now. I kind of like the concept of the organization and how it's been built up, and especially what I loved about the episode here was when they did the whole, removal of the new Skinner, or the current Skinner, and all of the people that worked for the organization are loyal to the organization, not loyal to the individual. I thought that was really telling. Because obviously value loyalty above all else, we know, is one of Red's famous lines. And so to have him become the Skinner and have this new group of people, I think is a great way to get his organization and the Blacklist back up and running again after the 2-year hiatus, because we're assuming during that 2-year period that Red was in hiding. Maybe the information in the Blacklist was still functioning as it was. But from Red's perspective, I think a lot of people Dembe left him, right? So did all of his original compatriots go away? Are we going to see
we don't know that yet. Hang on, I want to stop you. We don't know that he left him yet. We don't really have the details as to how his journey to become an FBI agent. I'm sorry, I still giggle when I think about it. I love Hisham. I love the performance. I love Dembe. It's hard for me to wrap my head around how are you an FBI agent, but I covered that last week. So I just wanted to say, we don't know how that he left him. Maybe Red abandoned him, maybe in his loss and just being despondent, he abandoned Dembe. It's possible that it went that way. We don't know the details of that yet.
Yeah, we don't know what the ramifications of everybody else, like Brimley and Marvin Gerard and all of the normal people that were in his network as part of the syndicate. We don't know what the status of those people are yet either. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and if the Skinner organization is truly now part of the overall Blacklist operation.
Exactly. Interesting where we're going. But why do you think he wants to be a Skinner? I mean, do you get the impression that he is no longer the criminal empire that he once was? That's the only reason I could see him wanting to be the Skinner now, is that he lost some of that control or power that he used to have. And so now this puts him in a position to where he seizes it up again. Otherwise, unless there's an endgame I'm not getting, obviously we don't know what that endgame would be. And there's probably a reason we don't know yet. But what are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting because when you think back on the Blacklist and its purpose, the purpose of the Blacklist was to keep Liz safe and keep Katerina Rostova hidden, right? That's what we learned at the end of season 8. So was he ever really did he want to be the master criminal, or did he have to be the master criminal in order to keep the operation going? Was he truly playing the role of a criminal when really at the end of the day, he just wanted to take care of his daughter, right? The real question now becomes, well, now that you don't have that in play, how ruthless could Red become? Could Red truly get to a point? Because it looked like while he was getting the tattoo, like he almost enjoyed the fact that he was going to be this badass mother and take out the entire world kind of look on his face. And so I'm wondering if he's going to change his modus operandi to be an actual criminal now and embrace the situation and what's going to happen going forward, albeit that certain people still don't know his real identity. So therefore he still has to play the role of Raymond Reddington, naval officer. And I think that's going to be an interesting juxtaposition as the season goes forward and how that plays out.
Yeah, it's a very curious development. And I do think this is our new mythology. I mean, for this revamped show. And I very much, now that we have both parts, I would call it a revamped show. I mean, it's still the same concept, essentially, but the whole personal element of Liz Keene is removed.
Yeah, and it almost felt like this episode really made it seem the show was actually, I know we were concerned that it was going to be more CBS Case of the Week kind of feel to it, but I felt like this was a lot more emotional this week, a lot deeper in a lot of ways. You had,
How so?
Well,
I didn't feel that way, so I'm trying to find out why you did.
Well, just the pondering of Ressler when he's standing at the office, and then Cooper's conversation with Ressler, and then Dembe's conversation with Ressler, and Red's motives because Ressler talked to him about why we should be doing this in the first place. It seems like there's a lot of introspection going on. Is that a word? Introspective. So I think that's interesting to see like what motives are going to drive our characters this season. I think that's a little bit of a more interesting place than we have been before. Before it was just, we got to do good and get these people off the map because Red's giving us these bad guys. But now there's like personal journeys that are driving why they're doing what they're doing, and exploring those personal journeys could really be interesting for these characters as they grow.
How do you not figure that they weren't on personal journeys the last 8 years?
I mean, they were, but it's not. It wasn't the driving force of the show. The driving force of the show was catch the bad guy.
I don't know if I agree with that at all. I mean, Liz's obviously was personal the entire way. It's just she had so much of, in terms of being, a female lead, that was a very large portion of it. So that kind of took away from the rest of the task force having the opportunity to kind of dive into their personal storylines in any kind of real depth. It was always very intermittent because really we were always back to Red and Liz and Red and Liz and that sort of thing. So I think maybe now you have more time for those characters to kind of fluff up their emotional cores.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. It's the more time thing, because before it was Liz is on a personal journey and everybody else was along for Liz's ride of that personal journey. They never got to do their own personal journey. Like, why the hell am I even doing this?
Well, they did, but it was very small. It was like intermittent, like I said. Because, I mean, Ressler had moments and Cooper had moments, and then they would be quickly forgotten about. We barely hear about Cooper's marriage or, Ressler's addiction until this episode. Put it back in our faces. Aram hasn't really had much of an emotional connection since Samar. I guess he had, what was her name?
Elodie,
thank you. He had her, but that was more kind of fun. Zippy.
Rebound.
Yeah, rebound. There you go. But yeah, so now they get a little bit more meat, I guess, to chew on than maybe they've had the opportunity for. It's not to say that I think it's necessarily a good or bad thing. I'm just saying that that's how I see it, because I don't agree that it wasn't emotional until this year. I think it's been emotional the whole time. There's been tons of emotional things. It's just Liz was more of a focus.
But yeah, for me it was, I think I'm just connecting with the characters more on an emotional level, because you weren't not that you weren't necessarily connecting with them emotionally before, but it's a different kind of feeling, I think, coming out of this episode. Just especially the focus that seems to be around Ressler. Like, I'm liking where this could potentially go, where Ressler's kind of becoming the new Liz in a way.
Did you recognize, like, first episode, there were several mentions of Liz and whatnot. In this episode, I don't think there was one. There was alluded to in terms of where they were looking, and Ressler's pondering face and Red's pondering face, but I don't think it was actually said out loud.
The only time they mentioned it was, I think, when they were referring to Red's conversation with Ressler, because I know Red talked to Cooper about that in Cooper's office, and then they were obviously in Ressler and Liz's office in the post office.
But even then, that was a Ressler reference. That wasn't really about Liz.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Correct.
So I feel like that's okay. The first episode, we addressed what happened before. Now the second episode is we're moving past it. Like this is your new show. Now you have both episodes. Here's where it lines up. So the question becomes, Troy, what do you think of this new direction? It's new. It's not really too different, but it's definitely new.
Yeah.
Redefined.
It's what we've always said. Like if you give the answer, you could still tell more stories and wrestle with what the repercussions are of that particular answer. And I think this was the first episode where you start to see like what could that new thing be. And for me, the new thing is we're going to follow Ressler this season. We're going to see what his 2-year fallout did to him, how he wrestles with the fact that how he wrestles with the fact that we obviously see the pills in this episode. We have Dembe saying, hey, this is why I wanted to come back and become an FBI agent, because I honored and respected you and who you were. And yet in the car when they're riding together, Ressler's all like, we got to break in. We got to just bust it down. We got to go do this thing. And he disobeys Cooper's direct order and all of that stuff. So you're seeing the former Boy Scout being more loose cannon, where Dembe is now picking up the Boy Scout angle. And I think that's an interesting thing to play with in the story that you can tell from that.
Yeah, I do think we are leaning more into formulaic than before. I enjoyed the second episode much more than the first one. I didn't enjoy the first half of the first episode. I think I talked about that in the last episode. And then it got a little better. And this, I think, got a little better. Only difference is I don't think the action scene was very riveting. I felt that was kind of a little, but the rest of the episode was pretty good.
And maybe
the driving scene.
Yeah, maybe it was intended that way. The camera work was actually kind of interesting and a little bit different also. Like the cameras that were like right on the wheel on the front side of the car.
Reminded me of Dukes of Hazzard, man. A
little bit. Yeah. It was kind of interesting. But I think that was intentional for this episode, because I feel like even though it might go case of the week, and I'm not saying case of the week is bad, case of the week just has to be, give me something more than just catch the bad guy. And I feel with this episode, give me interesting
bad guys, give me interesting development. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think what this one did is, like, if you don't have an overall mythology for the show and it is just case of the week, catch the bad guy, it's the characters that the fans have really grown to love over the years, and having these deeper connections to the characters may be what the mythology is. It's, we catch the bad guys, but every time we catch the bad guy, either I lose a piece of myself or I gain a piece of myself. And how does that journey of our characters, especially like Park and Peter, and how that's going to play out as we move along throughout the season? Does that cause her to make different decisions or choose different things? And I think what Liz went through in 8 years is now what these characters are going to go through, is that same, am I doing good? Am I doing bad? What is the end goal of all this? And that interpersonal struggle, I think, is what the show's going to become, or at least for season 9.
Absolutely. Interesting. I'm curious where we go from here. I am digging this. I mean, it's not the same show to me. I think it's completely different. It feels different. Maybe that's a good thing. It's still too early to tell in terms of that. It doesn't feel like the same Blacklist for sure. I do notice John's voice not there, especially with music, which kind of leads us into that. I really feel like a lack of music the last 2 episodes. Is that something that you noticed? Yeah,
we've only had the one song, right? And this week we had right at the end again is where we get the actual one singing tune. I mean, Porter's work has been amazing still. I love everything that he's been adding.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not talking about the score. I'm just talking about the soundtrack.
The actual soundtrack, the songs. Because this week we only had the one at the end when Dembe and Ressler are having that chat inside of Liz's old office. We hear the song Rival by Ruel, and I thought it was a fitting song. I think the song still fits. It's just it's like right now it seems like it's missing. Maybe they're saving the music budget for a big action episode that's coming up or something, but having only one song per episode, like, it just doesn't feel the same as it used to.
But on the same token, I mean, to be fair, I also think if you're going to kind of rebrand and recreate the show, that might change too. I mean, that might be an aspect that they felt needed to change, to kind of change the vibe of it. Like maybe, Eisendrath really feels more inherent to musical score as opposed to soundtrack. It's that matters. That changes things. So we'll see how it works out. Maybe it's just a critique that's not fair because I'm critiquing 8 years of a show when this is trying to be something different. Like it's
Correct.
trying to rebuild itself and recreate itself in many respects.
Hey, look, from a fan perspective, the score is great. The songs, when they're there, are still on point. The song matches the tone of the scene that's going on. As a podcaster, I love the less music because then I don't have to look the crap up all the time.
That's funny. That's funny. All right, well, let's get into our characters. And this is where we kind of break down each character and where their journey is. And, we've already talked about some of them, but we'll kind of hit on them anyway. Panabaker, now a senator. How do you feel about that? I mean, that is a quick turnaround because primaries and getting elected, that takes time. But I guess in 2 years, as long as that election lined up, it would work.
It's a 6-year cycle, so the 6th year could have fell in there, and she was already kind of maybe probably starting her run towards the end of season 8, and then obviously she has a campaign year, and then boom, she's a senator in year 2. So it's very possible. She was very prominent at the FBI in her position already, so it's not like it wouldn't be too big of a jump for her to go that far. I'm
glad she's still in the show. She's like one of my favorite characters. I kind of wish she would be regular, honestly.
I do too, especially with the dialogue with her and Cooper. I laughed so hard. It was so great. The word choices that you used to write her. It's great. It's so great.
I want to get the band back together. I don't know what band you're talking about because I disbanded the band. It was just great dialogue. And, I enjoyed the quick turnaround from her point of view where she was just like, I don't want nothing to do with this. If you can do some good. All right, let me see if I can make this happen.
Yeah, and then she's in the chair having the side chat with Cooper, one-on-one versus in the hallway, and she's just like, I'm just not going to like this.
Yeah,
but it's fine.
I do like that her character made the acknowledgement that, in terms of what did you have to do to make Dembe an FBI agent? I'm like, thank God somebody said it out loud. Why I know they kind of made jokes about it, but I'm like, I need an answer to this question. I really, really do. I can swallow a ton of things, but this... And it's got nothing to do with Hisham. It's got nothing to do with Dembe, the character. It's just got to do with, maybe it's because my criminal law background, whatever, my brain won't get past. No, that makes no sense to me. I mean, asset, sure. Agent, what? No. But so I'm glad she at least alluded to it, that there obviously had to be some kind of deal in place, back channels to make that happen. Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Interesting. And she does make the deal to reinstate literally everyone. So are you happy everyone is back as an FBI agent, even though, apparently that's very easy to do. So apparently, why am I even thinking about Dembe? Because apparently Ressler can be a mechanic. Boom. He's instantly reinstated. I mean, Aram's off doing private equity deals and somehow, boom, he's back in. No problem. I guess I'm just overthinking it. It's apparently very, very easy to be an FBI agent if you know Red Reddington.
Well, I mean, if you think of the state of the current world right now with everybody that's able to quit their jobs and go basically anywhere because of the whole great resignation and everything that we're talking about. I mean, yeah, the nice thing about leaving jobs is that the talent market is so scarce. I mean, it's plethora of people, but yet the talent is so scarce from a skills perspective that when you think about if I had a chance to come back to my old employer because they still couldn't fill the position, you could come back to your old employer fairly easily. It's not like, Aram left on bad terms or Ressler left on bad terms. They left because the task force disbanded because the confidential informant wasn't giving any information because he disappeared. So,
sure. And they were sad.
And they were sad. Yeah.
And they were sad.
So I like that they're all back together. I mean, they were going to work together anyway because the show is obviously moving forward. But being back in the post office, I think, is fun because it gives a sense of familiarity in a brand new concept, which I like.
And we've got Cooper back in charge, running the task force, gets the post office running again. He's instrumental in making that happen. Obviously, it almost feels like he's got more to do with the show than he did before. Because, I almost felt like Cooper was relegated to the background for a lot of last couple seasons, where he would just show up, bark an order or two, and then move on. I think he got a little bit more to do these past couple episodes. Could be just set up for this new season, but hope that doesn't mean he's getting at any point.
Oh man. Well,
just kidding. Don't freak out. I was just kidding. No one right. I was just kidding.
Aaron's like, oh man, Cooper's going to die this season. He's already going there.
So if we can move on to Ressler, he's still struggling. Still got that beard that doesn't quite go all the way up. I don't get that. Maybe he can't grow it. If it's a style, it's driving me nuts. Still has his hair messed up, but still doesn't move. Even his hair messed up doesn't move. It's amazing to me. Whatever that product is it Gorilla Glue? I don't know what it is. I want some because my hair's all over the place at all times. It never looks that good. But what'd you think about Ressler breaking out that vial of pills? And obviously he looks very kind of down through most of the episode. And even at points, it feels like they're comparing him to Dembe of old. Yeah,
like in the car ride sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely feels like their roles were shifted. And I think it was really a great point at the end of the episode that interpersonal conversation was happening between Dembe and Ressler in Liz's office. Because it's almost like Dembe's trying to ground him back into what he was, so he doesn't go down this dark path of either depression or anxiety or what he might be dealing with. And when the pills came out, I was like, oh, I'm really glad someone like remembered that was a storyline and a piece of his character. Now, maybe it's perfectly legal. Maybe it's prescribed by his doctor or his therapist that he's been seeing for 2 years.
It looked like no prescription bottle, buddy.
Well, yeah, my daughter
like some
carries
ecstasy.
But I carry around like a pill box if I'm like traveling or something, so it could just be his pill box for the day. But he just overloaded the pill box a little bit.
Pill box for the day. That's his Tuesday pills.
His Tuesday pills, yes.
Yeah, I think addicts usually have a pill box just like he had. I'm just saying. So it looks like, and then definitely the way that camera hovered on it, it was meant to imply. Yeah, meant to imply he might be back on the pills, back on the drugs.
Also, the startled expression he had when Cooper came up behind him, like he was trying to hide something. That was a really great moment there to say, "Oh, like I shouldn't be, like, oh, you scared me."
Mm-hmm. I do like specifically in terms of Ressler. I've said that in multiple episodes. I felt like he never gets enough to do, and I like him more when he's not being the Boy Scout. Like especially that episode Brothers. I think that was great. And here the last couple episodes, he's really kind of playing a different version of the character. And I feel like Diego feels more natural in this, actually, personally.
Yeah. And I also love the fact too, in that conversation when Cooper does sneak up behind him and startles him with the pills in his hand, I feel like that could go one of two ways. It could go from a standard response of like, hey, what are you doing? You good? Can we get back to work now? But Cooper does a really great job at like actually addressing the fact that he might have a mental condition going on, some kind of mental illness, and doesn't, he's like, he apologizes for maybe I shouldn't have come to the shop. Maybe I shouldn't have been there. Maybe it's too soon for you to be back here. Like he addresses the fact that Ressler's going through something rather than just being like, hey, if you're here, you're here. You're not. Get the F out kind of thing. So I appreciate the show doing that.
Well, now we move on to Dembe, and I kind of hope Ressler keeps giving him grief about being an FBI agent because that'll make me feel good that I'm still chuckling. So he says he wanted to be like Ressler. That's why he wanted to be an FBI agent. I kind of like that. That was an interesting swing. What did you think about this whole revelation that Dembe became an FBI agent because of Ressler? How did you take that, I should say?
I thought it was interesting because when you think about all the time in the back history of Ressler and Reddington, and Ressler chasing Reddington for 5 years prior to the task force starting. Dembe's part of that organization at that time. Like these two have major history, right? 13 years, if you will, if we count all, calendar years of the show, but like 13 years of watching each other evolve in their ability. Ressler obviously can appreciate Dembe for his loyalty and his dedication, and Dembe can appreciate Ressler for his following the law and doing what's right and having that moral compass and moral code that Dembe questioned Red on, and why he went on his own path at the end of season 6, because he was tired of having to like lie and manipulate in order to get things to happen versus being truthful and staying to his religion. So I think that the conversation between the two of these people and how they reconcile where they are in their thought process, in their work style, in their love for Liz, and love or disdain for Reddington at the same time. I really thought this was a great conversation, and hopefully we get to see more of it. And I think they're alluding to the fact that they'll probably be partners for a lot of the season, especially having that conversation in the partner office where Ressler and Liz used to be. But now Dembe could be sitting in that chair as well.
Yeah, I really kind of like that, where they look longingly at the desk, but it isn't like constant reference to Liz. I mean, as much as I did like the character of Liz, I don't if you didn't, that's your call, but I did. And I like that more than just bringing it up all the time. Because I really, even though I don't want Agnes in the show, it seems like she's gonna be. So I need to just let that go. But I also don't want a constant mentioning of Liz. Not that I don't want her acknowledged. I just don't want that to be like a constant storyline. I just feel like it'll bog down this reinvention that they're trying to go for. I love Hisham, by the way. I think, I've always said I want Dembe to get more to do in the show, and now he finally has it. So, I mean, that's just because I'm making jokes about him being an FBI agent doesn't mean that I don't like his character any less. I just, come on.
It's a technicality.
Yeah.
What I did like about this too is like as they were talking and things, we spent a lot of time with Ressler and Liz in that office in the first season of the show, but we also didn't have much in that office, like except for like a coming in and going out kind of feel. I felt like maybe it's just because we've watched the show for so long and having been there specifically, is that you can't have the angles look different. Like the way they're by the yellow elevator, when they're by the staircase, when they're by Aram's desk, the angles of the post office and how they're shooting the post office, I think was very interesting because it felt different for a different season. Yet it's a familiar place, yet it has ghosts or bad memories or different perspectives. So I really love the camera work as they went through the post office in this episode.
Aram, there's no word on his side hustle, unless I missed it. I don't recall anything. But he also said he didn't think he'd miss this, but he obviously does in terms of working with the FBI. It's obvious Aram wants to help people. That's like his number one goal is he wants to be relevant. He doesn't really care about the money, obviously, because he's given up whatever would be billions probably for whatever the programming is going to use. So were you kind of dismayed that we didn't even hear about that side hustle when it was so important and pertinent to last week's episode?
Well, I mean, if the investor invested and it all worked out the way that we were led to believe at the end of the episode last week, then I don't need that anymore because he's a silent partner, right? He created the code. He sent the code to the guy. The guy's going to run the business around.
Oh, let's set him up. Let's just set him up to be filthy rich.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
So I don't care. It's a Norton antivirus. It'll sell forever.
I definitely now that we've got a little bit more screen time, I guess, and more storyline devoted to each character, which is nice. That is a nice perk. Bring back the Aram of old. I feel like we haven't had as much of the emotional connection, the heart of the show we used to call him, as in the last couple seasons. So I would like to see him come back to prominence in that respect. Yeah,
and don't sideline him just because he's the guy that's back at the post office sitting at a desk. Right?
Yeah, man, it's 2021. You can have all that stuff with him. He can have it on his phone now. He doesn't need to have a laptop anymore.
He could just break into billionaire investors' houses and do it from there.
You could do it that way. I like that. That's a great play. Park, she does need to have a little chat with Peter, her husband. That seems to be set up for maybe the next episode because they did set up a time to talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she drives like a maniac, just so you know.
Yeah. I mean, the acting was a little bit like we said, we saw what it looks like when they bounce in a car. I can only imagine what this looked like shooting it because even on screen, the hard turns were a little bit harder than they needed to be.
Very aggressive. Very aggressive. I was scared for Aram.
I was too. Yeah. Oh, and then right at the end when they're like coming and you're like, okay, is she driving to literally have the Tesla like ram into the side of the door? I'm just like, you're putting your partner in danger. What's going on? Like, why are you going to let him slam into Aram? Like, of all people, like, I hope she's going to like slam on the brakes and spin the car and hit the backside of the car or something. Because I actually was afraid for Aram's life for like a hot 2 seconds.
I was afraid for a lot of people. And now we're going to move on to Red. And I just want to ask you, what do you think about Weecha, his new side Dembe?
I like her because she reminds me of like the quiet Dembe from like season 1, season 2, just in the background, always being there. What I'd love to find out is if she's going to have the same badass fighting gunplay abilities that Dembe had, if the need were to arise, rather than just being a confidant, a driver, and a purveyor of fine alcohol.
Yeah, that is great. I really want to try that. So if anybody has a connection to whatever that rum was that looked delicious, I would like some. like alcohol that doesn't give me a headache, yeah, I'm sipping.
For sure.
Drinking. I'm probably guzzling, honestly, is what I'm doing. So you like the kissing scene. Why did you like that so much? For the ladies, just basically, you're Red Reddington? All right. Make out. And no tongue, no helpy.
Because I literally looked at it as the lens of like majority of the fans that are watching the show, going like, okay, they really know the audience. And I just sat back and was just like, every single woman right now is just like, dear God, please let that be me. and the fact that James just kind of played it off the way he did, he's like, well, you got to do what you got to do. And he took off his hat and just leaned right in. And I was like, and the fact that it was like an extended kiss and long period of time, I was just like, they're really going for it. That's awesome. I love it.
I just like how he kind of played it off in terms of this isn't normal or this isn't abnormal. This happens before. I mean, I just never got the impression that this was a new thing. He's like, oh, all right, well, I guess this is what I got to do. Again, this happens to Red Reddington all the time. But that whole thing does bring me back to the question I asked a while ago. Do you feel like he still has his criminal empire, or is he kind of let that go and just went to taking care of himself, going to the monastery, kind of relaxing his criminal pursuits to focus on just depression and staying alive, I guess?
I think that's a question. I think that's definitely a question we have to ask ourselves this season is what of the original syndicate is still available and around. Obviously, the name Red Reddington after 2 years still strikes a chord in at least some older criminals and people have been around in the criminal world for a while. At the same time, it's very interesting to see how it goes.
Okay, so one thing I am really curious about, touchy subject, I guess, but we did not talk about this really much last week, but how are you digging Red's Dr. Evil look?
I think one of the listeners actually referred to it as Lex Luthor. the Kevin Spacey edition, potentially.
Oh, don't you keep Spader and Spacey separate.
Well, just because of the way that, and I love the fact
that... No, I get it. Yeah.
That somebody made the reference that, like, what happened to your hair? like the nice thing about the show is that they understand that we are asking these questions and they're putting it in and breaking the fourth wall. And I absolutely think it's hysterical because we're just like, okay, at least you guys know that what we're looking at and you're respecting and honoring that we're looking at it.
Yep. And the straight razor and the whole deal. Yep.
Yeah. And then the story that comes along with it, like, seeing a naked woman shave her legs with a straight razor. Like, that's a perfect Reddington line right there because that's something that Red of season 1 of season 2 would have said for sure. What I don't like the coat is what it is. I like the
coat.
Yeah.
You're fine with a shaved head. It's the coat you're not digging.
Because with the shaved head and just the coloration of the skin compared with the light jacket. Yes. Welcome to Troy Fashion 101.
Right.
The light jacket just doesn't work for me. He needs to be in a darker suit coat or a black trench coat or something just to offset the brightness of his head now. Because even when he put on his hat, I felt like the hat and the coat just didn't go together.
Okay, Tyra Banks, I didn't really look that deeply into it. I'm just like, why does he look like a light bulb? But, I get it. It's funny because James Spader is a handsome man. It's just, I don't know why. Even though there's that baldness and whatnot, the stubble, I think, looks better on him. Just not that we care. It's got nothing to do with the show. Just fans are asking, so I figure we had to ask at some point.
I like the bald head personally. I just think he needs to be in a sleeker color so that it looks more formidable. Right now, it just kind of looks a little goofy. Like he's like, I'm like going to, Miami and just hanging out on the beach for a while.
Vacation, yeah, it kind of has a vacation look. Yes,
exactly.
Agreed.
Yes. Like
not so much Red Reddington, more like this dude that's at all-inclusive resort.
And I almost like expecting him to have loafers with no socks.
Ooh, don't go that route. Don't do that. Unless you're Sonny Crockett, you can't pull it off. Nobody can. It does tell a wonderful story about being struck by lightning. You think that was true or just a story? You think he just has a little too much Caddyshack in him? What? Yeah,
I'm sure it's just exactly that.
Okay. All right. So we got his immunity agreement reinstated by making the deal with Panabaker. What do you think he wants in return from her? Not from everybody else. From her or from.
Honestly, I don't think he wants anything from Panabaker. He just needed it done so that way he could take over and do what he needed to do, which is still get information. He needs to, if he's doing this for Liz and keeping the empire going, then obviously he needs to have the United States in his back pocket to get information to keep the intel flowing through the Blacklist. So he just really wanted
he said, I need something from you, which means I'm going to have to give you something. So the indication there is that he does need something from her, but we don't know what. I don't think we didn't hear that.
Yeah, it's a line that he threw away to Cooper to say how it all came back together.
Yeah, I think there's something more that he needs. I don't know what that is, but
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
And he is the Skinner. Once again, I mean, that's the question, like, why? Why do you want to be the Skinner if you're already all powerful or you used to be, and I would assume you could rise again pretty quickly, like he has in the past when he's lost everything. Why is this so important? That's interesting. It's like he wants to bring down an organization, possibly, again? Like the Cabal?
Or the Cabal still functioning just under his leadership, and then he puts other lieutenants in charge that report back up into him. So he's actually amassing, and maybe his goal is to control the world.
So no theories yet?
No theories yet. Still early.
No theories. Okay. Just checking.
Just here for the ride. And so far, after the second episode, I'm in for season 9 at this point. I like the character development. I like the deepness and kind of digging into that and just really trying to. It's almost like learning the characters all over again. I like it. It's interesting. I'm
a little mixed. I definitely miss certain aspects of it. I obviously miss Liz, but I also miss certain aspects of it. In terms of, it feels like a different show. But I'm still giving it a couple more episodes before I have a firm opinion on where I feel about season 9. Because there's some stuff I really like and some stuff I'm just like, I don't know about that one.
Because we'll
see how it plays out.
Sham, Aram, Amir, everybody on the net have all said, like, it's a different show. It's a different season. And so, they're honoring the fact that it's not the same Blacklist that it used to be. So we just have to understand that and kind of go on the ride with them.
And part of that might be an adjustment period, right? It takes a little bit to kind of get in the flow and say, okay, it's a little different than what we're used to. So let's see. You got to keep in mind, for 8 years, the whole show was driven, even though they had blacklisters, it was driven by Liz's pursuit to find out about Red. And now that's not a factor anymore. That is completely out of the show. So it is a new show. It is completely new.
Yeah.
I mean, you lost one of the lead characters and, lead motivators. So, as long as we keep Agnes on the basketball court or whatever, volleyball, soccer, whatever the hell it is, just keep her in every sport possible, keep her busy, I think we're good.
Change is hard, but you can't grow if you don't change. That's the big thing. Sure.
And you know what helps with change? Keeping kids off camera. That's just what I'm saying. I'm just saying. All right. So we want to take a second to say thank you to those of you that are supporting the show by going to Patreon. That's Patreon, patreon.com/the-blacklist-GSM. You will get this episode a little early. Troy will talk about that in a second. Special big thanks to honorary Blacklister Patricia. Also special shout out to our task force members, Judy and Sharon, Rory, and welcome Karen as an official task force member. All of these people receive cool gifts from us, and you could get a cool gift as well if you donate at the $20 level or higher. If you want a cool t-shirt or a coffee mug, you don't have to stay at that level forever. Just a few months, get the cool gifts. There you go.
There you go. And some of you still need your gifts and have not sent me your address or what you want. So make sure you check your Patreon inboxes. We also have the Ask Me Anything for this month for all of the patrons. It's a special bonus that we're doing this year. We've got a couple questions in already. So make sure you get those in by end of the week, because we'll record that next week and get that posted for everybody. Because it's just something we want to do new for this year. And new for this year, we're obviously recording the show on Friday mornings after the show is aired. So you're not getting the episode right after when the show aired like you did in the past, but you are getting it first. So patrons will always get the episode before everybody else. Everybody else will get it a day later. So make sure you sign up over at Patreon. That's patreon.com/theblacklist-GSM for Golden Spiral Media. Click on the fedora and fill it up, and make sure we keep the podcast up and running for many years to come, hopefully. And we'll be back with Special Agent Intel right after this.
Hey there, fellow podcast listener. Do you love video games but are tired of the negativity surrounding most podcasts?
Why not give the Gaming Outsider a try? We set ourselves apart from other video game podcasts by including our community in the discussion on games as much as possible. And hey, we'll never charge you to be part of the show.
We pride ourselves on being an inclusive, family-friendly show while discussing industry news, the games we've been playing, and a weekly topic centered on gaming both new and old.
So check out The Gaming Outsider at the same location you're listening to this fine program, or check out our website, thegamingoutsider.com. And remember, there's no such thing as a bad game, just games that aren't for you.
Hey, Dembe loyals, this is Hisham Taufik. You are listening to Blacklist Exposed on Golden Spiral Media.
Okay, Special Agent Intel is our thoughts from you guys, whether it be about last week's episode or something else, or this week's, whatever it is. First one is from Nicoletta Forlini. I feared you, but I agree with a lot of what I heard on the podcast last week. I think we all have doubts about this season, even a hardcore Spader fan like me, and one episode is not enough to judge the whole. There are things that scare me. Agnes and the Witch, above all else.
Sounds like a great TV show name for next fall.
Yeah, I would kind of watch that. Agnes and the Witch. And things I still hope will change for the better. Like your question of the week about the post office. I really hope they change the set a bit, because I would love to see the Blacklist as it was explained in Macello. I don't care about them being FBI. I care for them to be a group of experts and friends under Red and his empire, which I still hope is not just criminal, but something more complex and useful for all. I'm very curious about it. Well, some of that didn't work out for you.
Not so much.
Post office is pretty much exactly the same.
And they're working for the FBI and not for Red. But even though they still work for Red, we all know the truth. Alina Danovich said, thanks for the podcast. I enjoyed it. I did like season 9, episode 1 episode, but it does feel a little off. I'm sure it's in part due to not knowing where the show is going. After spending 8 years on one question, it's kind of hard to change direction. I love seeing everyone again, love the funnier moments. I don't even mind Agnes, but I hope she does not become the central focus of the show. I miss Reddington's hats and outfits. Even the car changed because they were driving a much more souped-up SUV than the car itself. Most of all, I miss the music. If there's a reason why episode was a little flat, it was due to the lack of the amazing songs. The first 8 years nailed the music.
Well, good. I'm glad I'm not alone in that critique.
Yeah, no,
that's good.
People are seeing the same things, which is good, which means we're all aligned as fans on what we want and what we don't want.
Yeah, and they're paying attention. I mean, and they'll probably, I would guess, tool things as they go, because, anytime you see a show where it rebrands or kind of relaunches, the first couple episodes are a little clunky because they're kind of finding their footing and what they're trying to do. Even though I've said, let the first 2 finish out, I would probably give it like 4 or 5 before I really have a hard opinion in terms of what I think about the new direction. Even though a lot of it's a similar direction, a lot of it's also new. So it really takes a while sometimes for a show to find its footing. And because I love the characters, I give them 4 or 5 to really have a good opinion. Now, if it's a new show, you get 1, maybe 2, 3 tops. That's it. Too much content out there. But Blacklist, I give you 4 or 5 before I have it.
And I think this will be interesting because we have the Winter Olympics coming up next year. That COVID and everything else pending, of course. But I think if the Winter Olympics do happen on schedule when they're supposed to happen, I think this is a show that's going to be, here's the rebrand. We're going to make it to wherever we get cut off as far as episodes airing for the Olympics. Then it's a real question of, did they do enough to actually make people want to come back after the Olympics to finish the season? I think that'll be the true test of if the Blacklist has legs for a while.
Right. Okay. Last one. And Becky Trumbo, thanks for the kind words. It is great you are all back listening as well.
Yeah, we appreciate all the fans, and we'll be here each and every week that the show airs, covering off on all of the Blacklisters and all the happenings from the post office. We're back. It's so nice.
That's going to conclude this discussion. So now is the time to recommend the Blacklist to your friend, your enemy, your neighbor. And when you do, please also recommend they subscribe and listen to the Blacklist Exposed podcast. All the cases profiles can be found at theblacklisexposed.com and everywhere great podcasts can be heard.
For more great Aaron and Troy hijinks, follow us on social media. I'm at Troy Heinrichs. He's at Aaron Smirks. Together we are at the Blacklist GSM. And we are just so thankful, again, that you guys are all here after this 2-parter. And we'll see what new stuff happens next week.
Okay. And big thanks for listening. Don't forget to answer our profiling question. Why does Red want to be the Skinner? Why? What's up with that? Why? That's it.
I mean,
we'll be back next week.
I want a tattoo. Do you want a tattoo?
I've got a couple tattoos. You want to see them?
Not right now.
I got to take my shirt off. Hang on. Don't you wish this was audio only, Troy?
$5 on Patreon. You might get to see it.
Nobody wants. Now we're going to lose everybody. Good job.
That's right. That's right. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week. Until next time, I'm Agent Troy Heinritz. That's at Troy Heinritz on Twitter. And if you want to learn more about me, just visit, about.me/Troy Heinritz.
And I'm Agent Aaron Peterson. You can hear me talking about movies and TV on the Hollywood Outsider podcast, as well as Remake This Movie Right. We are available at thehollywoodoutsider.com or on Twitter at 5popcorn. Be sure to subscribe, download the app, submit your feedback, but most importantly, keep yourself off of
The Blacklist. The Blacklist Exposed is a Golden Spiral Media production. Find more of our great podcasts at goldenspiralmedia.com/podcasts.